Welcome, friends. I think I can start the webinar. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar on minority rights in India, assessing the past 6 months and the trends. I am Dr. Ritamra Manubi, and I'm joined here by 4 highly esteemed speakers to walk us through their concerns regarding the human rights crisis faced by the minorities in India. This webinar is hosted by Sticking the London Story, which is a diaspora-led non-profit human rights organization, and may I add, Indian diaspora-led non-profit human rights organization based out of Europe. Sticking the London Story, through its program Perpetrator Tracking Hub, documents the grave violation of human rights in India and simultaneously also tracks perpetrators who can be held liable for hate speech, hate crimes, and incitement to hate crimes in India. London Story also has a presence in Brussels, where we work together with human rights defenders, policymakers, and members of diaspora to highlight the minority situation in India. Today, I'm joined by 4 speakers: Ambassador Stephen Raab, National President of People's Union of Civil Liberties in India, Kavita Srivastava, Jesuit priest and human rights defender, Father Cedric Prakash, and Gambian High Commissioner to UK, Ambassador Fatou Bennasuda, who will be joining us shortly. Without much ado, I would like to invite Ambassador Stephen Raab to take 10 minutes for his intervention. I would first like to introduce him. Ambassador Raab is the former United States Ambassador at Large for War Crimes Issues. He most recently served on the panel of independent international experts, which in 2022 concluded that there is evidence of likely violations of international law committed against Muslims in India. Ambassador Raab has been a senior visiting fellow of practice at Balwantechnik School of Government and a senior fellow at the Oxford University's Center for Law, Ethics and Armed Conflict, where he has been co-leading with Federica Alessandra a stakeholder consultation project to develop policy proposals to strengthen global capacity to gather and preserve evidence of criminal responsibility of the most serious violations of human rights. Ambassador Raab, I want to pass the mic to you with the short introduction. There is so much I can say about you, but we will cover that as we go along in some of the questions as well, because I would like to know if you see any similarities and trends in India versus what you have done in the past. So, Ambassador Raab, please.
Well, thank you very much, and very honored to join you today. I'm doing it from Washington, where we're at 6 a.m. I think the room will get a little brighter as the day moves along. As you mentioned, I served as a member of this panel of international independent experts on the violations. It was formed in 2021 and reported last year with a report of about 500 pages, which we can provide the link to for people to read. And we actually brought ourselves together as people that have been involved in efforts to achieve compliance and enforcement of international law. And it included Marzuki Darusman of Indonesia, the former Attorney General of that country, who's also served as the head of several UN inquiry commissions, including the one on Myanmar. Also included Sonia Bezerko, who's been from Serbia, who's been a courageous reporter for the Helsinki Commission on violations against non-Serbs by the Serbian government and allied groups from the 1990s forward, and initially included our final panelist, Fatou Bensouda, then leaving as just having left as the ICC prosecutor, but then she had to leave our group when there was her government appointed her as High Commissioner or Ambassador from the Gambia to London. But very happy that she can join us today. Introduction to our report was from Navi Pillay, the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, who endorsed our findings. We frankly focused on 2019, 2020 to 2020 violations, particularly in Assam, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, and Jammu and Kashmir, and found that there was credible evidence of serious human rights violations, as well as crimes under international law, which had been exacerbated by a toxic environment created by the national ruling party as well as the expectation of impunity resulting from the absence of independent investigations and prosecutions of those responsible for the human rights violations and international crimes. Since then, we've continued to monitor the situation, working in close partnership with the South Asia Justice Campaign. And I was just in Geneva, where we reported on the situation more recently to the special mandate, the mandate holders, special procedures mandate holders, special rapporteurs on various human rights in the United Nations system during their annual meeting in mid-June. Based on the work, and we presented 8 fact sheets there, we can say that the situation in the first 6 months of 2023 is no better. And because of the continuation of the toxic environment and impunity actually becomes worse. Now, because of my own experience, which didn't come from the human rights world, but from the international criminal justice world, where I led the prosecution of the of the media leaders in the Rwanda tribunal established by the United Nations, and a trial presided over by Nabi Pillay, and then later was involved in prosecuting being the chief prosecutor at the Special Court for Sierra Leone that prosecuted a president, Charles Taylor of Liberia, and eventually convicted him. And my work for 6 years for the Obama administration, pushing for accountability for international crimes. My focus was to a greater extent on those violations, which gave rise to individual criminal responsibility for violations of international criminal law, the law against genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. And in that, in our report, even though we were dealing with a whole range of human rights violations, we noted that some of the conduct, particularly some of the hate speech that had been frankly condoned and provided impunity by governmental authorities, actually was crossing the line into incitement to genocide. And of course, we know from other situations how difficult it is to prove a genocide, the requirement of the intending to destroy a people in whole or significant part, and the sort of standards in terms of their physical destruction that have been required to be found for a determination that the crime of genocide has been committed. But the crime of incitement to commit genocide is actually a preventative crime and is inchoate. And if you have someone that intends the destruction in substantial part of an ethnic or religious minority, and they then deliver messages which incite that among certain individuals who understand that message, and they deliver it in a situation that is sufficiently volatile to result in violence and death and physical destruction of even a few individuals. Genocide incitement can occur when there's actually no death. That when we have speeches like we were reporting on, where one individual had said, all we need to do is recruit 100 men who will each take care of or deal with 20 lakhs of the Muslims. Well, 20 lakhs, we don't use that term in America, but I mean, I was 100,000, that's 2 million. Each will take care of 2 million, we'll recruit 100 million. In other words, we'll get to 200 million and we'll achieve victory. And then following that, you have these incidents of lynching and encounter killings and everything else. So we actually think that in those situations, we cross that threshold. There is also, as we determined in the media case, the crime against humanity of persecution, and that doesn't require the destruction of a group, but it does require that discriminatory intent. And where one even speaks or otherwise acts to persecute, and that leads to some kind of forceful action against that group, it has to actually lead to it. It's not an inchoate crime, but it doesn't have to be a massive. It just has to be part of a widespread or systematic campaign or attack against an ethnic or religious minority. You can actually cross the line into crimes against humanity, persecution. And we've seen in the first 6 months of this year, incendiary rallies in Mumbai and Delhi and elsewhere, including the religious parliament or Dharam Sansad in February and the Ram Nuvani festival in March, where speakers called for the killing of Muslims responsible for alleged religious conversions. And some speeches were actually delivered in the presence of members of state legislative assemblies and state ministers. Under our Rwandan tribunal, we actually convicted some individuals who were present in a prominent role when these speeches were given, and by their presence had essentially encouraged the action and had shown their sort of approval. So these are situations that actually cross the line into my field. Understand, however, that we also have, of course, this whole range of discriminatory laws, this whole sort of toxic environment that we describe, that gives rise to these things and actually encourages extremists to carry this forward. And of course, I mean, others can report on them, but I mean, in our report, we had, and currently in our fact sheets, we talk about the anti-conversion laws, which of course really essentially deny people the right to religious freedom. The cow protection laws, which criminalize livelihood practices of Muslims and Dalits. The Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, which of course led to all of the demonstrations that were responded to with such horrendous violence, which are explicitly discriminatory against Muslims while allowing other groups to access the citizenship procedures. The Foreigners Tribunal Act, the Disturbed Areas Act, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, the Presidential Caste Order, the the National Education Policy of 2020, a whole variety of things are explicitly discriminatory. And so that's the sort of challenge that we're facing in this space. And at the same time, those of us that have been admirers of India as a democracy and as a sort of a beacon to the world of so much of the world that became independent and shook off colonialism and established a secular constitution, inclusive system, and something that promised the rule of law. We're profoundly disappointed about the failure of, as I said, any sort of action. I mean, for instance, we had in Karnataka, all of this kind of incitement that occurred in the run-up to the elections earlier this year, and unfortunately, it didn't work. Even the national prime minister condoned the sort of the attacks that were occurring and said that those that were the critics were against the Hindu nation, but fortunately that didn't work. But of course, when there was actually a change of government and they looked at the records, they saw that in Karnataka, there had been 182 cases of hate speech and vigilantism and communal violence that had been dropped. So it's no wonder the guys get essentially the message that this kind of thing is approved of. And if there are prosecutions, as we saw following the still called civil unrest, but the demonstrations, the unrest was called by the violence against the peaceful demonstrators. It was the peaceful demonstrators that ended up being prosecuted. And we see, the kind of response to petitions, 140 petitions challenging the Citizenship Amendment Act filed on January 22nd, 2020 in the Supreme Court. We still don't have a response to that. How many months is that? Like 42 months ago, and 41 months ago, to be absolutely precise. The abrogation, of course, of Article 370, the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir in August of 2019. It was finally assigned, I think, to a 5-judge bench. There hasn't been a decision in that case. There's been cases on anti-conversion laws, at least some temporary relief in 2 states, another 4 states, however, where they've been pending more than 2 years. And one of the cases that we cited, and it's not within the current period, but during that repression of the Citizenship Amendment Act demonstrations, and when all the prosecution were the demonstrators and the victims, one particular judge asked the police to watch a video of that violence. And that judge was reassigned before the day was done. So you don't have the level of independence. And really, one of the most disturbing things I recently heard personally, and we're working on examples of it, we know what's happened in Jammu and Kashmir when it comes to civil society organizations with groups like the JKCCS and Karam Parvez, whose reports were often cited directly for earlier reports of the UN human rights system, who's been in custody now for more than a year. We have actions now against journalists, and others can talk about India now being 160, number 160 on the list of countries as unfriendly to journalists, almost to the bottom. There are 180 on the list. But even advocacy by lawyers is on the brink of being criminalized as essentially terrorists. I mean, lawyers who raise the issues of the application of the international humanitarian law relevant to occupation, which of course we've got 750,000 Indian troops in Jammu and Kashmir, and roadblocks everywhere, and a situation that clearly is occupation under international humanitarian law. And then that means you have to follow the rather permissive standards of international humanitarian law, including treating people humanely and everything else that's been defined in that body of law. When they cite that, they're accused of being secessionists and as terrorists, because obviously they're saying this is an occupation. This isn't just naturally part of India. And so that's the kind of criminalization that we have of remedy. I hope that doesn't follow through, but lawyers are feeling profoundly under threat by the sort of arguments and the sort of attacks on the framing and search warrants and everything else, and people being afraid for their safety. And so we have this sort of shutting down of civic space. Understand that when you have these sort of deprivations of human rights more broadly, these are often the warning signs of mass atrocity. The position that has essentially supported me while I've done positions at Oxford and served on a variety of non-governmental groups, boards, panels, and everything else since I left the State Department 7 years ago, is from the U.S. Holocaust Museum and its Center for the Prevention of Genocide. And as you may have seen, the Holocaust Museum has put India quite high on its list under the early warning, protect statistical risk assessment. Last year, it was second on the list of countries that were all of the tick, 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 tick of sort of indications of the threat of mass atrocities were there. We're getting a new report out as we speak, but it's always, for the last several years, been in the top 15. I'm going on, I think, much too long, but I did want to say, obviously, Modi was here in Washington in the last few days. We were intrigued by the fact that, where he doesn't have to answer press conference calls in the United States or in India, and is quite, in a bubble there, at least in the United States. He was into these situations where, standing with President Biden, he was required to answer press questions and was asked specifically what could be done to improve the rights of Muslims and other minorities in your country and uphold free speech. And of course, as you know, his response is, we have no need for improvement. Our Constitution and our government improved democracy can deliver. I say we can deliver regardless of caste, creed, religion, gender. There is absolutely no space for discrimination in my government. And so, obviously we can be critical of that as not correct. But I think fundamentally now with that statement, we need to hold them to it in terms of what happens from this day forward, and view this as a commitment to end this toxic environment. But we will see.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador Arab. This 10 minutes intervention was really a good ground laying for our webinar ahead of us. And I have personally so many questions that I am going to perhaps put forward when we reach to the Q&A session of this webinar. But before that, I now would like to invite Kavita Srivastava. Kavita is National Secretary of People's Union for Civil Liberties, India's largest human rights organization. PUCL strives to defend civil liberties and human rights of all members of society. And with PUCL, Kavita has filed cases in India's highest court seeking protection against exploitation of minorities and fraud against state-sponsored violence, including mob violence as well as armed force violence. Recently, Kavita also wrote to the Chief Justice of India a letter petition urging the Supreme Court to take cognizance of the alarming rise of hate speech, vigilantism, and targeted communal violence against the minority communities in the state of Uttarakhand. I would like to invite you to make 10 minutes intervention on the status of minorities in India, especially in terms of seeking justice and accountability. Kavita, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This platform for me is absolutely new. And therefore, I'm pretty unsure actually what is expected of me. But the fact that we are getting a platform to talk about what is happening in India, to democracy, to our constitution, to our minorities, what is happening by and large is an important opportunity. And therefore, I did agree to come and speak on your platform. So I'd like to start where the Ambassador Rapp stopped. The point is that we've reached a stage in India where the core constitutional values have been replaced without even amending the constitution. The core constitutional values have been replaced. Somewhere we are seeing justice being replaced by injustice, liberty by repression, equality by discrimination, fraternity by not just hatred and indignity, but also a public that is increasingly getting dehumanized. And I think this, for me, yes, I am part of a human rights organization. It's very important. My colleague Cedric Prakash is also here. But to live in India, to live in this India today, and to see, a complete restriction in free speech, to see hate speech and hate crimes, get on with complete impunity. The people who indulge in this have absolute impunity. I mean, as if they've taken some amnesty and come and they are allowed to do what they want. It's very difficult to summarize trends in 10 minutes. So let me just take you through some very quick ideas, particularly you asked me about investigation and state accountability. So I've stated the framework right in the beginning about the accountability where we find ourselves today. Now, in India, you will see, we're talking in the context where 200 churches were burned down in a small state called Manipur. 200 churches. Because a particular community, the Kukis, are Christian, and it started initially with some sort of an ethnic conflict, but later turned out to be a majoritarian attack, a Hindu majoritarian attack on the Kukis. And how can anyone destroy even one church? You cannot destroy it without the support of the Indian state. Father Cedric Prakash is here. He knows what happened in Gujarat. It's only a certain state sponsorship. All officers have told us that if a riot has to be stopped, any kind of attack, assault on a community has to be stopped. It doesn't take more than 6 to 8 hours. You have to have the will to do it. It's not so easy to cause an ethnic conflict. So we are speaking today in this backdrop, 200 churches being burned down, and absolutely no statement about any of it, no apology that such a thing has happened, no attempt at, courts taking suo motu cognizance. The Supreme Court of India should have just taken suo motu cognizance of what was happening. No suo motu, forget the Supreme Court, the High Court could have done it. There is a bench in Manipur. So it's very tragic that we are seeing this in India. So while the Islamophobia is something that is so, that has completely changed the fabric of this country, let's not forget that even the Christian minority is under attack. Talking about Islamophobia and what's happening, I just need to take you, just through the last 1 week. I mean, it's so easy to actually get Muslims inside the jail. Any kind of assault that happens, between communities, any kind of conflict. Firstly, it is the majoritarian Hindu community, which by and large, in most of our investigations, who provokes and causes some sort of an attack. For instance, Akola in Maharashtra, just 20 days ago, had a small communal incident. 106 Muslims have been arrested, 4 Hindus. And you know what the bail bond condition was? Get Hindus to get you the bail. Now, is that anywhere in the, is that justice? That's completely illegal. You can never pose such a condition, but this has happened. Just today morning, I don't even have to look back, a cattle transporter was carrying cattle and belonging to a district very close to Mumbai. He was killed in Nasik. He was lynched in Nasik because of the allegation of being a smuggler. Now, I have worked on lynching quite extensively. And the lynching incidents really increased after 2015. Now, if you ask, what have the courts done? At least let me tell you, in Rajasthan, out of the 5 incidents of lynching, only one, they did a conviction, but not of murder, of culpable homicide, that they never intended to kill the person. I mean, look at the absolute protection. Even where we get a judgment, in the earlier case, we never even got a judgment in favor. In fact, everybody was acquitted for want of evidence. And here, when we get a judgment, it is culpable homicide. That kind of parameter would never be used between a Hindu and if the Muslim was the perpetrator of the crime. That kind of judgment would never have come. In lynching, I want to tell you, where there is no state accountability, and let me state it, that we are on the edge of genocide. In some parts of India, I can say that we are on the edge of genocide, because when 2 people are just picked up in the name of the cow and there is nothing, they don't have the cows, they're just beaten badly and strapped to the car and burnt alive. Now, something like this happens when the police knows, because they first, after beating them up almost to death, brought them to the Haryana police. 2 people were picked up from Rajasthan state, handed over to the Haryana police. Haryana police said, no, we will be booked under custodial violence. You take them away. And then they burned them alive. And after that, let's talk of accountability of the investigation system. Rajasthan state and Haryana are next to each other. It's just an administrative boundary. But in every village of Haryana, there were panchayats, assemblies, that we will not let Rajasthan police enter. Secondly, not just that, the Haryana government and the Haryana senior officers very clearly said, we are not going to cooperate with Rajasthan police. Is this India, Pakistan? These are 2 states. One state has to cooperate with the other. Now, if this is the kind of impunity and amnesty Haryana state is going to give to its cow protection task force, a legitimate body, a cow protection task force, which works with the police, who can just easily burn alive 2 people. And then out of the 30 people who should be arrested, only 3 get arrested. You can see where the criminal justice system is going. When in Rajasthan, we don't have a BJP government, where we all push the government to try, but it's not possible, without the cooperation of local police. This is one kind of a situation. And today, don't know what is going to happen to the person who was lynched. Will there be any justice? Don't know. It's quite sad that I'm only talking the last 1 month, a film like a Kerala Story, which this whole bogey of the love jihad. I mean, this is something that demonizes the Muslim. Firstly, it takes away my bodily autonomy. Women have a right to express themselves with whomever they wish to. First of all, that is a tenet which is my constitutional right. However, we've got some of these laws all over the country. These are called freedom of religion acts. Actually, they're not freedom of religion. They take away my anti-freedom of religion act. Now, in the last 2 years, several states brought in a clause of this, the marriage clause, that if there is conversion for marriage, so there's life sentence, there's this sentence. Now, this has become such a big bogey that in Kerala, it's quite sad that a film was made where they advertised that 36,000 Hindu girls were converted and forced to marry Muslim men. Some of them were even used by ISI and others. But when the matter went to court, they said, no, we're only talking of 3 stories. We don't know about this 36,000. So how were you advertising? So instead of the court making them accountable, the story, of course, is running all over, and it caused in different parts of the country, it has been causing all kinds of communal incidents. So 1 month this film has been running. Of course, crores and crores of rupees the director and producer are earning. But the kind of communal violence that it has caused in some parts of the country, including what started out in Akola. Incidentally, there was a communal riot because one person put a picture which is told is Aurangzeb's picture as his profile on his mobile, his WhatsApp. His WhatsApp DP was of Aurangzeb. Now, the Mughals are whom you want to completely, the medieval period, which had different kind of Muslim rulers, which you want to erase from Indian history. So this person who put it on his profile ended up in jail. Imagine, he ended up in jail. Look at, is there any freedom left in this country? I think the attack on the freedom of religion of Christians and Muslims is something we have to take very seriously. In the month of Ramzan, there is something that people do in their individual households. They call their neighborhood Muslim friends, and they have a reading of the Quran. They have passages that are read from the Quran through this month. For the first time, it's called Taraweeh. For the first time, the practice of Taraweeh was not allowed. People couldn't do it in the house. Now, Hindus can hold all kinds of religious readings. You can read from the Ramayana, you can read, and you can do it loudly with blaring mics. You can call anybody that you want. But here the Taraweeh, which is something where the entire, friends and others may get together and read, was not allowed. There were cases. People were even threatened. Societies threatened residents. So, where are we surviving? And in Madhya Pradesh, there are more, UP and Madhya Pradesh lead the number of cases of so-called love jihad. And boys, actually Muslim boys in detention makes no difference. We have, the people of the Delhi riots, in jail for more than 1,200, 1,300 days since 2020 April to 2020 September. It makes no difference. The trial will never start, like we see it in the Bhima Koregaon case, a case where intellectuals, lawyers, trade unionists were picked up in the name of Maoism. It's 5 years and the trial has not started. So, if you look back, in Karnataka, you had the whole, we saw last year, the run-up to the election had Muslim women being denied the choice of a hijab. Now, how could courts, the High Court, the Supreme Court, there was a split judgment, But the High Court judgment, literally, what literally? It did deny women the right to go to school. I mean, imagine if I wear a hijab, I'm denied education in the school of my choice, in a public educational system. The fact that the girls are coming to study, basically women's bodies. Let me tell you, the same thing is with love jihad. The same thing is with hijab. Women's bodies are actually area of contestation of the entire Hindutva forces, and they're doing it one after the other. The way the hijab battle was fought by young women just to take the exam, just to go to school. They didn't realize that the state would come down so heavily. And what do you see today? The Law Commission of India comes out with a report that there should be a uniform civil code. You're sparking, you're provoking yet another, you're igniting a community. Once again, women's rights, once again, women's bodies, where in the name of, yes, the Uniform Civil Code is in our constitution, it is a directive principle of state policy. But can you codify, for instance, the Sharia? Which is uncodified. Can you codify it? So if at all, I'm from the women's movement. I remember in the 90s, around the Mandir Andolan, where the demolition of the Babri Masjid happened to build the Ram Janma Bhoomi temple, we put the UCC on the back burner. We realized that if at all we're going to get, it's going to be a Hinduized uniform civil code. So we put it on the back burner. Even today, we want to put it on the back burner. It doesn't mean people don't have an optional code. People can, in fact, they need to revise the Special Marriages Act, which exposes identities, where you have to wait for a month. Instead of facilitating easy marriage between, where people can make choices, where they can choose to marry on their own and have a secular law they're now moving towards the UCC. And I'd like to close by saying that we are now living there. I said that instead of justice, we have injustice. Justice, liberty, fraternity. These are the tenets of our preamble. What is this bulldozer Raj that we are in? And it's not just UP. What about, but even before the crime is fixed on me, I am punished. Recently in a school, 2 non-Hindu girls wore hijabs and took a photograph. The complaint went to the collector settled it and said that this was done by choice and the parents of the girls had no problem. Parents are trustees. But even before the collector's report could be read, the chief minister of Madhya Pradesh made it a big issue. And that school called Ganga Jamuna School, which means 2 civilizations, the Ganga River and the Yamuna River, are two civilization rivers. And so you say that the civilization that has come between Ganga and Yamuna is a very composite culture, Hindu-Muslim mixed. They demolished the school. And the demolitions, so 2 things. Demolition is something that is the preserve kept for Muslims. You are punished even before the crime is actually pronounced, even before the crime is settled, even before there's an FIR. Your house could be demolished, and this is absolutely unacceptable. Similarly, encounters. The PUCL is in the Supreme Court on the UP encounters, and look at the number of killings that have happened. A total of some 2,500 encounters have happened, of which 41 killings are straightforward, killing of Muslims. And in police custody, they killed 2 prisoners. Now, that just cannot be acceptable to any of us. I close here that there is absolute collusion of the present government and the judiciary. Yes, our only hope is the judiciary, but to make the judiciary accountable is a very big task. The media is constantly building up that narrative, and therefore it's a very grim moment The trend is only going to worsen. Five states of election in the next few months, including my state, Rajasthan. It may try to be like Karnataka, the 5 states where the election's about to happen. Again, there'll be a lot of assault on Muslims, or all kinds of rallies, etc. I hate to say it, but we are in for grim times. Yet, I think we're going to fight back. Whatever it be, we're not going to let go of this constitution. Me and all our colleagues and all our allies, we are an ordinary people of this country, I think, are understanding what is happening. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kavita, and thanks for that reaffirming solidarity that you just expressed with all the human rights defenders in their quest to fight for justice. I also see that Ambassador Fatou Bensouda has also joined us. Welcome, Ambassador. I would first like to give the space to Father Cedric Prakash. We are running a little bit late, and then I would like the space to be taken by Ambassador Bensouda. So to introduce to our audience, Father Cedric Prakash. Father Prakash is a Jesuit priest and human rights defender who has been on an unconditional and relentless quest for justice and harmony. He has lived and worked with indigenous people in slums, with internally displaced persons in Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and with Protestants and Catholics in Ireland conflict, and provided emergency humanitarian aid during periods such as 1984 massacre of Sikhs in India, the 2002 Gujarat pogrom, and several others. For your work, you have received the Legion of Honor by French government, the Mother Teresa International Award in 2013, and several other awards for your humanitarian work. I would like to invite you to give us a view on how the current patterns of governance are impacting minorities and testing the communal cohesion. And I already see that somebody has already, and I think Father Prakash, you will cover this in your intervention, the situation in Manipur, where 200 mosques have been recently burnt down. So, Father Prakash, I give the space to you.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Manavi. It's good to be here with Ambassador Rapp, with Ambassador Bensouda, with my colleague Kavita, and with others from the London Story. And also all the other organizations who are co-hosting this program. Thank you for focusing on the minorities of India. Because if there is one thing that makes for the pluralism and diversity of a great nation like India, which boasts of perhaps one of the greatest constitutions with a very visionary preamble, I think is the fact that we have minorities in India. And minorities are certainly the Muslims, the Christians, the Sikhs, the Jains, the Parsis, the Jews, the many indigenous peoples, the animists, and a whole lot of people who follow what we call the folk religions. But sadly, what is happening in India today, very especially since, the last few years from 2014 onwards, is a constant attack on the minorities. It has been foisted and perpetuated, not merely by people at the grassroots, but by the state itself. And there is no denying about this fact. This is a non-negotiable, incontrovertible fact. And this is what Ambassador Rapp also referred to in his very, very insightful introductory remarks. I would like to categorize what I would like to be saying in 5 words, beginning with the letter D. It is to denigrate, to demonize, to discriminate, to divide, and to demolish or decimate. Many of these words are overlapping. You might regard them as synonyms, but I don't regard them as synonyms. What's happening is you have a strategy here by the most powerful in the land to denigrate minorities, very especially Muslims and Christians. You regard Muslims as terrorists, as anti-national, as jihadis. That's denigration. That's wrong. That's unconstitutional. You talk about Christians as converters, as having allegiance maybe to a foreign land who do not belong to India and so on. And this contravenes on the basic tenets of our constitution, on the fact that we are a secular nation in which every person has the right, according to Article 25 of our constitution, to preach, practice, and propagate one's religion. So you have these anti-conversion laws. You go, the head of the Child Protection Committee of India goes and raids even orphanages run by the Mother Teresa sisters. He finds a Bible and he asks the little girl, do you read the Bible? Of course, she says it. What's wrong? I read the Quran, I read the Bhagavad Gita, I read the Avesta, I read the Granth Sahib. So then you make a case of forced conversion. And when the child is not even Catholic. Recently in Jabalpur, we had cases foisted on the Catholic Bishop of Jabalpur. False cases, false allegations, and so on. You have words like drug jihad, that every single Muslim is peddling drugs, which is not true. Some of the biggest contrabands of drugs seized in this country have been here in the Gujarat port, what is known as the Adani port, and the newspapers have kept silent about it. So the denigration of minorities, I think, is there high up. Then you tend to demonize. My colleague Kavita has already referred to the Kerala story, which is bogus, which is fictitious. There is the whole strategy. You tell a lie 1,000 times, which is Goebbelsian, and people tend to think it's the truth, and you try to say that the allegiance of every single Muslim is with Pakistan. They are supporting Pakistanis. They are the cause for all the troubles in the country. They are the ones who will do all harm to your children. And this is the way you demonize another or the other, I think is terrible. And the focus of demonization is definitely, as we have seen in the last many years, and especially in the recent past, as your report would say, on the Muslims and Christians of India. Then you discriminate. Anyone who goes for a job, a public job, a government job, if he or she has a Muslim name, has a Christian name, all kinds of weird questions are asked, and the discrimination is, and the person is not given that employment, even if the person has the competencies and is a deserving candidate for that job. And we have seen you are discriminated again about what you wear, what you read, what you see, where you live, whom you worship, and things like that. Even if you use, just across the road from the place I live in, yesterday a temple was blasting from early morning to late evening. But if a mosque in Ahmedabad, the city I come from just now, has the loudspeakers on, immediately there are police complaints. These are clear cases of discrimination. There is the divide and rule policy. What is happening in Manipur has been mentioned here in the chat box as a question, I think is a serious case. Till today, the Prime Minister has not uttered a word. From the 3rd of May, when the attacks began, it was, as Kavita already referred, it began as a kind of an ethnic issue. But the fact that the Christians have been targeted, their houses have been burnt, many of them have been killed, hundreds of churches from across the denomination difference have been destroyed and burnt. I think it warrants, international awareness. Many people across India have come out on the streets and so on, protesting as what has been happening, asking for the dismissal of the local government. Okay, but the regime, which is works in tandem with the state government, which is also BJP, is clearly out to divide, to polarize, and in many parts of India, you create the sense of majoritarianism. We are here to protect you, and we are here to protect your Hindu identity. They don't care about the Adivasis. They don't care about the tribals. They don't care about the Dalits who live on the fringes of society, on the peripheries, and who are constantly, used, as tools in this vicious campaign of hate. Then there is demolition. If you're a Muslim living in a slum in a poor area, or if you take a stand, immediately there are bulldozers, whether it is in UP or on the other parts. You're decimated. Let's take the case of Bilkis Banu, a woman who was gang raped. She had 17 members of her family who were killed during the Gujarat violence of 2002 on the 3rd of March. The men who were responsible were given life imprisonment with some very, very weird kind of concession. They were all released and their life sentence was commuted. She's still struggling in court. And this woman now is decimated. They kill for no reason. We have seen the case that just now in Nasik, where somebody who was allegedly, with a cow or with a bull, was lynched to death. And this is happening with frightening regularity. What's happening in Manipur today to the Christians, what is happening, and in several other places. If you're a pastor, if you're conducting a prayer, immediately you're attacked. Immediately, the place in which you're having your Sunday prayer, false cases are foisted and, an alleged conversion. Fortunately, one quote just the other day has said, unless the grief party, says that I'm forcibly converted, the police cannot file a complaint against forced conversion. But as already mentioned by Kavita, a lot of the police are working in tandem with the state regime. The police today in many parts of the country lack objectivity, lack impartiality, and lack the possibility of providing justice to the victims, very especially to the minorities. I can go on, but I don't want to be repetitive. I think it is important that, the London Story and other groups who are together sponsoring this important program, take a united stand, okay, to tell the world what is happening to the minorities of India, to take a stand now, because tomorrow, I believe, will be too late. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Father Prakash. And I will come back with some questions during the Q&A. I'm being mindful of the time. I would like to now invite Her Excellency Dr. Fatou Bensouda. Dr. Bensouda is a Gambian lawyer and former prosecutor of International Criminal Court, and also the first woman to serve as the prosecutor of the ICC. You're currently serving as the Gambian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. And through your work, you strive to advance accountability for atrocity crimes, highlighting in particular the importance of addressing traditionally underreported crimes such as sexual and gender-based crimes, mass atrocities against and affecting children, as well as deliberate destruction of cultural heritage within the Rome Statute framework. You have provided significant advice to the panel of independent international experts, which in 2022 concluded that there is evidence of likely violation of international law committed against Muslims in India. Ambassador Bensouda, I would give you 10 minutes for your intervention, and then I would request if people can stay a little longer for a Q&A, a very short Q&A, which will be. Thank you.
Kavita, thank you very much for firstly inviting me to the panel, but also I want to apologize for being late. We at the last moment we had auditors from the Gambia who were coming to do their work, and unfortunately I had to give them time, and that's why I am late. But I'm very pleased that I have the opportunity to be with you and to participate in this very, very important panel discussions. I have not had the benefit, of course, of listening to previous speakers. I understand Steve Rapp, a mentor of mine, has already spoken, but also I just want to recognize what the immediate speaker has said regarding what is happening today in India. And I think that he could not be more explicit, and he could not be more passionate about what has been taking place. For me, perhaps not also wanting to be repetitive, because these are really my thoughts about what is happening. I think today we have seen enough situations and examples, enough of these atrocity crimes being committed so regularly that we do not have any doubt that there is responsibility now. I would say there is responsibility for at the highest level to try and stop this. There has to be commitment. There has to be steps taken at the very highest level for these crimes to be stopped. Because if the message that goes down, if the message that these crimes get committed and nothing is being done, no condemnation is being made, on the contrary, what we have been observing is that very responsible personalities are actually endorsing what is happening. This is very serious. And of course, responsibility, in fact, criminal responsibility, would even fall on them for allowing, but also encouraging and endorsing and not punishing, especially what is being done. At the end of the day, the plot becomes all-encompassing, unfortunately. That if it is because crimes, when they happen, it's not only that the act is done, but where there is responsibility to stop the act or to punish the act, and this is not done, also gives responsibility in the crimes that are being committed. And this is what we see today, unfortunately. I see that recently, even when there was this visit by authority to the US, you saw that there were a lot of pushback and a lot of demonstrations against what is happening in India today, especially against the Muslims, against the Muslim minorities. This is in the Rome Statute, as you know. Also, these are crimes that are punishable, and it is high time, I believe, that responsibility is taken to either stop them or to punish those who commit them. I will give an example of the situation in Myanmar, for example. Myanmar is not a state party to the Rome Statute. Or maybe let me just backtrack a little and say that I think efforts can be made to engage the ICC, either through the Security Council or other ways. And when in Myanmar all these crimes were being committed, and Myanmar not being a state party, the frustration of ICC not being able to do anything, was very, 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 very high on my agenda. And what I did together with my team was to the fact that an international, the crime of international deportation was being committed, and the fact that when they left Myanmar, they landed on the territory of a state party, that is Bangladesh. We used that. We used that to go before the judges and say that, look, this crime crystallized on a state party, on the territory of a state party. Therefore, there is ICC can have jurisdiction. We argued that before the pretrial chamber, and ICC was given, the judges gave the OTP the jurisdiction. They gave us the the authority to be able to investigate into the situation in Myanmar. And that case is still ongoing. I was able to talk to the Bangladeshi authorities, and they facilitated and helped to be able to talk to those who found themselves in IDP camps in Bangladesh. So the case is still ongoing. But I also think that in this particular case in India, I think that maybe greater efforts can be made or should be made by NGOs. I know that a lot of effort is being done actually, but to engage, to try and lobby the Security Council to see whether this matter is something that can be referred to the ICC. Even the attempt, I believe, can have an impact for at least those who are committing these crimes or encouraging it or allowing it to happen, to know that there is a possibility that this matter can go before the International Criminal Court. And that I believe can be helpful. So I would encourage that. You know, sometimes you perhaps one would think that this will be of no use and that it would never happen and that there would never be a referral and all that. But there is no harm in trying and at least demonstrating the possibility that this can happen. I believe that this can also have an impact. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador Bensouda. And I see there is a lot of questions over here, but I also have some burning questions which I want to put to the panel. So I'm going to be a little selfish here and ask the question, because as a co-founder for the London Story, one of our agendas for forming this organization was to basically advocate of what is happening in India at a time when there was a Brexit and UK faction has moved out of the European Parliament, and there was like a really lapse of information on what exactly is going on within India at that time. And since then, we have tried to, as Ambassador Bensouda was saying, engage with the United Nations as well at different levels to basically put out the question of minorities and specifically of Muslim and Christian minorities to different countries and try to encourage them to ask these questions to India as well. My question to you, therefore, and I'm going to draw back to what Father Cedric Prakash and Kavita already said, that we do see this impunity within Indian state and non-state actors towards violation of human rights of minorities. These are hate crimes. These are on the brink of genocide. Crime can even be classified as genocide with some persistence, perhaps. And we have seen that the courts in India has not taken notice, as what Kavita said in her talk earlier, that they used to take suo motu cognizance, and that was a very refreshing mechanism by the Indian courts to develop the Indian legal jurisprudence as well throughout the past. But they haven't taken the suo motu cognizance in the cases of hate crimes and hate speeches and lynchings, etc. So what can we effectively do as civil societies, as concerned citizens, as diasporic actors, the world around us? What can we effectively do to cause this responsibility under the international criminal as well as the other international human rights processes? So either Ambassador Rapp or Ambassador Bensouda, because both of you are experts in the criminal law as well as the humanitarian and international law. So I put this question to you.
I mean, just be as quick as I can in terms of the range of things, and they're not as satisfactory as we'd hope. But I mean, one, there are the human rights sanctions that can be put into effect by the EU, but also by the United Kingdom, also by Canada, also by the US. I think there'll soon be an effort in the UK to sanction or groups that will be coming together to put together a package, particularly on actors that have been involved in incitement to genocide or kind of hate speech that'd be a crime against humanity. Get those individuals sanctioned in terms of travel and you know, they may not be travelers and asset freezes, et cetera. But that's a clear statement, and certainly that can be done, and it warns others that they could fall into that same space. Then there's the UN system outside of courts. The High Commissioner on Human Rights has responsibility to report generally on human rights. This last year, we have a new one, Volker Turk of Austria. He said the situation in India, I think, was worrying. You know, that's not exactly very strong. But, you know, that office should be encouraged to report more robustly on these violations as part of his general responsibilities. Ideally, we'd like to have a commission of inquiry, as we've had, or official UN inquiry, as we've had in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, in Syria, in South Sudan, in Ethiopia, et cetera. Many situations where the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction. That, of course, India being a member of the non-aligned movement, you know, having this great symbolic role that it's not living up to under its preamble, to some extent is hard to get an action against. We thought that was the situation with Sri Lanka, obviously a much smaller country, but I was deeply involved in the efforts to have a fact-finding there regarding the international crimes committed during the conflict with the LTTE, something that India actually supported us on until it got some teeth, and we actually called for an inquiry. Then they said, we don't believe in country-specific resolutions, so they didn't support us, but we got it. We got the votes. So that's the kind of thing. Short of that, there are these special rapporteurs that are making individual reports, albeit with very little staff. They get about a half of a person to work for them, unless they can get volunteers, and but for them to join together as an alternative. There is the possibility of third state cases, and we've had that in the context of Syria. I know when the UP chief minister recently traveled, there was efforts in Australia, which is a country that doesn't really do universal jurisdiction, but more countries are stepping up to do those kinds of cases. And obviously, for citizens to go in and really attempt to put together cases in countries that have universal jurisdiction, particularly where there may be a dual national or somebody traveling, you know, then I think there's that possibility. The ICC is potentially in range. They're involved with some who are putting together a case that rhymes with what happened in Myanmar with the Rohingya, because of course thousands of Rohingya, who of course have been in squalid camps in Bangladesh, are coming into India. They're being the victims of hate speech, being called termites and everything else. And a number of them are actually being deported to Myanmar. That's not a crime, because Myanmar and India aren't in the ICC, but some are actually being deported to Bangladesh. Now, it's not the 800,000 that were forcibly deported from Myanmar to Bangladesh in 2018 or 2017 that got to the ICC, but there will be an effort, I think, to file a submission to the ICC prosecutor to look at that particular crime. But but fundamentally, at the end of the day, which is my big theme since I've left the State Department, it's important to document these things specifically. You know, who, what, where, how. You know, have the photos, have the social media, have the kind of verification, have the package that really builds the case. And if you have that, and it's, I mean, there's all sorts of things that are in the air, but you've got to really nail it down in terms of specific individuals, or in the case of international criminal law, or specific state action in the case of international human rights law.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador Raab. Ambassador Bensouda, would you like to add something, and specifically also for your experience?
I cannot add anything else than what Steve has said. These are the ways to go. Of course, with respect to the Human Rights Council, I think this is also an area that can be explored. We have seen that even recent conflicts like Tigray, there was a committee. In fact, I was appointed to chair that committee, but there was a commission that was established to look into those crimes. I think we should continue. NGOs and human rights defenders should continue to push for that. It is a possibility to happen. And also with respect to the ICC, I know that going the UN Security Council route is a very, can be very difficult or controversial. And I know that attempts have been made already for that, but should not give up. Should not give up. I think the pressure needs to be on. And also maybe try to get other members of the UN Security Council who were there to lobby them and to make this, to sensitize them, let me put it that way, as to what is happening, and also to make sure that there is support, or there is enough support at the UN Security Council for that perhaps a referral to take place. But yes, these are the ways to go. And as much as possible, the preservation of evidence should continue. I know that a lot is being documented at the moment, but this should continue to make sure that whatever is ultimately going to happen in the end, there is enough documentation of the evidence and the various situations that have already occurred or will occur, that there is documentation and that the evidence is well preserved.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador Bensouda. Yes, we will continue in our collective efforts. I know that several of the organizations which have been documenting these crimes against Muslims, hate speech, hate crimes, lynchings, etc. And I think ours is also one of those organizations, but I know Kavita from PUCL is also doing that, and Father Prakash's other colleagues like Tista is also doing documenting very heavily on these things. I have, if I may, and I know we are 15 minutes almost over time, but if it is allowed, then I want, because this has been a recurring theme in the chat Q&A, and I would like to direct this to Kavita and Father Cedric Prakash on how to build this solidarity across, global community, across different diasporic as well as non-diasporic community, to sensitize them on what is happening in the supposedly the largest democracy in the world and how that impacts. So what would be your responses to such questions of what can we as citizens and non-citizens of India as well can do?
The Cedric Prakash, you first, then I'll follow you.
Okay. So, yeah, one can go into volumes of this. I think there has to be networking. There has to be collaboration. We have to be able to put the narrative of what's happening in India in the public domain as much as possible. We have to do it here. Many of us today, people like Kavita, myself, and many of our colleagues will be branded as anti-national, as people who have no love for the country. We are saying this, we are speaking out because we love our country. We love our country very deeply, and that pluralism, that diversity, that the wealth of our country, the richness of our country should be preserved for all times. That monoculture, the majoritarianism and so on should find no place. What we have to do is, as Rita has already been saying, document as much as possible, provide evidence, seek the courts. I think all of us here still have hope in the judiciary. We will knock at the doors. We have not always got the right judgment, both in the lower courts and in the apex court, but we will knock. But at the same time, we need to create synergies. Ambassador has, both the ambassadors have referred to the Human Rights Council, whatever it is. Groups like you, the London Story, and the other groups that have been co-hosts of this program need to take it to the diaspora, because a lot of the diaspora does not know the facts. I've challenged a lot of diaspora in other countries. I said, do you know what's happening? You're very happy to say that you're Indian, but you'll now not come back and live in Gujarat. You'll not come back and live in India. Why do you have a comfort zone there in the United States or in another country, including the Middle East? Okay, why do you not want to come and settle down in India and burn your boats there? Today from Gujarat, there are hundreds of people, Gujaratis, Hindus, who are trying to illegally enter into America. And we have some tragic stories of them being found dead. So I think, like recently, when Modi was still visiting the United States, the Time magazine brought out a huge article on the human rights situation in India. Okay, can you not write people from the London Story, write to the Guardian, write to the contact your members of parliament, contact other people who are there in the UK, in the European Union, the European members of parliament, and tell them that what is happening in India, there's been lots of lies being told abroad, and when Obama speaks the truth, after a long time, now that he's not president, but he spoke the truth. And now the amount of denigration he gets by some people from the highest powers of this country. So I think we need to create synergies. We need to create networks. We need to collaborate with one another in order to highlight what is happening. Because if India falls apart, a lot of South Asia will fall apart. We are foreboding a civil war there in Manipur. It is tragic, the situation there. So unless it is that war is put to a stop immediately, but that can happen only if there is pressure also from the international community. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights belongs to all of us. India is a signatory, and so are other countries of the world. So where human rights are violated in any part of the world, just as India can buy arms and ammunition from the United States at the great cost to our exchequer, to an ordinary taxpayer, other countries can also talk about human rights violations in India. That is clear.
So I just want to add a footnote, if I may, Rutambara. Yeah. So I think there are three ways. One is, we know the UN has weakened a lot, but the Office of the High Commissioner of UN Human Rights has announced only last week that they want to open a full-fledged office in India. Now we know that, this UN initiative and effort must be, facilitated by India, because India is a signatory to this particular resolution. However, we know that in India, human rights organizations are persecuted constantly. Amnesty closed, Greenpeace, Human Rights Watch cannot enter. Harsh Mandar, who ran this Center of Equity Studies, Tista has been to jail. So one by one. So it'll be very interesting that India, which tries to present itself as a law-abiding member of the International Committee of Nations, actually allows it. So this is one step which I think we need to ensure that India allows it, number one. Number two, I think there should be an national need to go into Manipur. Manipur for too long has been left, 40 days, because the first meeting that we had with groups of Manipur in Delhi was on the 19th of last month. And already, 10 days had passed, and we were just hoping that we'll now do peace talks. Now, I think the special rapporteur on human rights, minority rights, they never get entry into India. But they must try, they must come, or an international network of people should come immediately. And I just feel very strongly that the diaspora, whether it's in US or Europe, is absolutely majoritarian in its mindset. It's Islamophobic in its mindset. I don't know what we can do to them, but they have they've been detrimental, as Father Cedric Prakash said, detrimental to us, to our constitution. My point is that if Joe Biden had to do this grand reception of Narendra Modi and give him the red carpet and all that which followed, he should have realized that he is actually endorsing somebody who directly and indirectly is responsible for a lot of these crimes. He should know. I mean, the emperor is naked. That's all I can say. The emperor has no clothes. And I don't think any of us, we need to expose this. We cannot at any point support or turn a blind eye towards it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for sitting together with me on this panel. We are already 24 minutes over time now, and I would like to bring it to a close. I know we will continue to engage with each other, and I think a lot of people from our audience might also reach out to you for their queries and questions, and please feel free to do so. Our email is info@thelondonstory if you would like to reach out to us. I want to thank once again all the speakers who sat with me today. And I also want to specifically thank our co-host, which is the Indian American Muslim Council, UK Indian Muslim Council, Hindus for Human Rights, and Scottish Indians for Justice, who have co-hosted this event today with us. And I look forward to engaging more with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.